Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about a group of employees of the Employees Provident Fund organization siphoning off 21 crore rupees. We also take a quick look at the latest statement made by the External Affairs Minister at the UN Security Council. But first, we talk about the Sunanda Pushkar case. 7 years ago, Sunanda Pushkar, an Indian businesswoman and the wife of Congress MP Shashi Tharoor, was found dead in a hotel. And the police had alleged that Tharoor was the one behind her death. But after all these years, a court in Delhi on Wednesday discharged Tharoor in a case of abetment to suicide, cruelty, and possible murder. In this segment, we talk to Anand Mohan Jay, who reports on the Delhi courts for the Indian Express about the case from the beginning, what the police had been alleging, and what the court has concluded. So, Anand, could you talk about this case from the beginning? Who was Sunanda Pushkar and when did her death first come to light?
So Sunanda Pushkar was an Indian businesswoman and she was the late wife of Congress MP Shashi Tharoor, and she married Tharoor in 2010, and for both of them this was their third marriage. And at the time itself, even before her death, Sunanda was in the media spotlight. It started with allegations of misconduct in the IPL at the time, and this was a controversy in which even Shashi Tharoor's name had cropped up at the time. Then following this, there was also a high-profile controversy with regard to a Pakistani journalist where allegations had been made that she and Tharoor were close. And right after this controversy had even begun to settle, Sunanda was found dead at Hotel Leela Palace in Chanakyapuri in 2014.
This is in Delhi, of course.
This is in Delhi, of course, yes. And there was a sense of shock at the time. But right after the grief came a harrowing time for Tharoor, who has very recently, when he has been discharged, has said that it has been 7.5 years of absolute torture for him. This was because at the time there were several allegations which were made against Tharoor on several media channels. In fact, even his lawyer over the course of this trial had to at various moments say that his client has been subjected to a media witch hunt. And in fact, there were also several shows at the time where television anchors had dedicated their entire shows to the Sunanda Pushkar death case, and there were even anchors who had pretty much pronounced the verdict by holding him guilty at the time.
Okay, so take us through this. Sunanda Pushkar, she is found dead in this hotel in Delhi. How did we get from that point to Shashi Tharoor becoming the main suspect in this case?
So almost a year after this incident had taken place, the police had filed an FIR against unknown persons and they under charges of murder. Then on May 15, 2018, the police had filed a charge sheet for the first time in this case where they have named Tharoor as the prime suspect and they had charged him under sections of abetment to suicide and subjecting her to cruelty. They did this on the basis of post-mortem examination reports which had shown that there were 15 ante-mortem injuries. The fact that their marriage had not gone past 7 years. So if a death takes place before 7 years, the husband is usually a suspect. And the fact that there were medical reports which had alluded to the fact that poison was administered as the prosecution has been alleging. And witness statements of various acquaintances and friends of Sunanda Pushkar who said that all was not well between the two of them. So all of these factors led to Shashi Tharoor being the prime suspect in this case in the Delhi police charge sheet.
Okay, so the state prosecution is saying that the death could have been caused by someone poisoning her, plus there are these injuries which they are alluding could have been caused by Shashi Tharoor, and they are tying together witness statements to show that things were not right between the two.
Yeah, so there was this close friend of Sunanda whose statement in the charge sheet reads that Sunanda had told her that Shashi Tharoor had assaulted her. But the court had also noted that this particular witness did not believe Sunanda at the time. Then there was a statement of various, like the domestic help at the time, who had talked about how there was this tension between the couple and how there were arguments, how there were constant fights between the two of them. So the police tried to stitch together a case in which they tried to say that A, Shashi Tharoor had subjected his wife to cruelty, B, that there was an allegation of an extramarital affair because of which his wife was subjected to a mental sort of a cruelty, which pushed her to suicide. This is the main Delhi police case. And they also try to talk about the injections and the antemortem injuries, and they try to paint a picture in this case.
Okay, so they are doing this because they are trying to charge Tharoor in the case, charging him with murder. And while doing this, one of the things that was relied upon was the statement made by Sunanda Pushkar's son, Shiv Menon. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so this was a statement which was read in part. This was Shiv Menon's statement to the SDM at the time, which just said that his mother is a strong woman and she cannot commit suicide. So both parties had relied on her son's statement. Like if the prosecutor read out a statement saying that my mother could not commit suicide, then there was senior advocate Vikas Pava who represented Shashi Tharoor. So he had also read out an entire statement by the son to the court in which he had said that Shashi could not even hurt a fly and he would never have done something like this to my mother, and that he went into great detail about how his mother was going through a lot of difficulties towards the end of her life, and about the difficulties that she faced with Shashi and the difficulties of their marriage.
Okay, so Sunanda Pushkar's son's statements were used by both sides to sort of strengthen their case. But let's talk about the defense that Tharoor's lawyer had been building. How did he counter this narrative by the prosecution that there was a rift in their relationship and this cruelty by Tharoor that supposedly led to Sunanda Pushkar's death?
So for over 2 years, Mr. Vikas Pava, who is the lawyer for Shashi Tharoor, has just been arguing one thing. It's very clear for him. It's like that there are multiple medical reports which have been submitted in this case, and none of the reports have been able to shed any light on the reason for her death. He has been saying all this while that the report suggests that it is neither a case of homicide nor a case of suicide. And the other thing that Pava had tried to do was the fact that the police had relied on psychological autopsy reports. They tried to, through witness statements and through these reports, they tried to paint a picture about how Sunanda was subjected to cruelty. On the other hand, Pava had tried to bring on record Pushkar's tweets, some of her tweets, to show the fact that, that she did not have any suicidal ideations at the time. And that he also tried to put forward a joint statement that Tharoor and Sunanda had released, saying that they're happily married and there's nothing wrong between them. So Tharoor's lawyer has also been saying that the prosecution has been taking an adventurous route, that they are making these arguments in air, they are not relying on their own charge sheet.
Yeah, and I think in that sense, a good example of that was what the state prosecutor, Atul Srivastava, had asked the court. Could you talk about what that was?
So in August, Srivastava had told the court that the SIT, which was constituted in this case, had to approach the United States of America's FBI because previous government at the time had submitted a report. The previous government, meaning the Congress government, the CFSL had submitted a report which was not correct, and this was because it took place under the previous government.
So essentially saying that the Central Forensic Science Laboratory, or CFSL, under the Congress government might have botched up the report, so they had to approach the FBI in the US.
He alluded to that, because of which we had to approach the FBI. So Pava had rebutted this by saying that A, by the time the CFSL report had come, the government had changed. B, they're saying that it's a very irresponsible statement because they're saying that the police is doubting their own CFSL report. Pava's main argument, if you look at it, was the fact that you cannot prove abetment to suicide in this case because you don't know what the cause of death is. To prove abetment to suicide, you need to first A, prove suicide, that suicide took place. Now here you have multiple reports through which it's not clear whether this is homicide or suicide. So he says that the law is very clear that if it is not a case of suicide, if you're not able to prove that Sunanda Pushkar committed suicide, then you cannot book Tharoor under charges of abetment to suicide, and which is something that the court eventually agreed with and discharged Tharoor.
Yeah, and we mentioned this in the beginning as well, that this came as a lot of relief to Tharoor, who says that these past 7 years have been torturous for him. But what are some of the things that the court now highlights while giving this judgment and while discharging Shashi Tharoor of these charges?
So if you just look at the first contention of the prosecution, which is that let's bring murder charges against Tharoor. So the court has denied this, and it has said that there is absolutely nothing whatsoever on record to show that a murder offense is attracted in this case. The court has said this after looking at a report submitted by a medical board constituted by the Ministry of Health, and said that the investigation, which is proceeding on the premise that this was a homicidal death, is because of an injection mark. But then the court remarked that this injection mark was due to the presence of a cannula. It's a thin tube which is inserted into the body cavity to administer medication. So Sunanda had inserted this tube when she was at hospital in Trivandrum. She was getting treatment there. So the court said that the mark is probably because of this. Then the court said that medical report of the board had also ruled out possibility of death due to various chemicals which have been mentioned. Then the court also said that basically no definite opinion on a cause of death. So if you don't know whether the death was homicidal, it was suicidal, or it was accidental, or even the fact that charge sheet itself states that the alprazolam was not even considered a homicidal drug. So looking at all of this, the court had discharged Tharoor under sections of murder. It was very clear that it is not going to charge Tharoor under sections of murder.
Okay, so murder is one charge. What does the court say about the other charges like abetment of suicide?
So, the court has said that again that the prosecution has just not been able to bring anything on record to show that Shashi Tharoor was involved in abetment to suicide of his wife, or that Shashi Tharoor meted out cruelty to his wife. We talked about the fact that it was not proved if it's a suicide or it's a homicide. So if you're not able to prove it's a suicide, then you can't really charge him under sessions of abetment to suicide. Then if you look at the aspect of cruelty, the court, through a slew of judgments, it's saying that just because that Pushkar has suspected her husband being involved in an extramarital affair, you cannot say that that would amount to mental cruelty. This is one of the very important things that it said. The court said that there is no allegation or demand of a dowry, that there is no harassment by the accused. Prosecution was relying on witness statements of Sunanda's close friends and family members. The court then looked into the witness statements of two of her brothers and her own son, who were like the closest, and they have themselves said that they never suspected Tharoor of any wrongdoing or the fact that he could have done something like that. So the court said that her own son is not going to bail Tharoor out if he would have thought that there is an issue of cruelty which is being meted out. So the court said that her own son is not going to try and bail him out if the allegations were right.
And I think in this regard, Pushkar's son's statement that Tharoor could not have murdered his mother as he could not even hurt a fly, I suppose that statement takes significance.
That takes quite a significance, because even in these cases, if you look at these cases on a day-to-day basis, if you have family members who make very clear allegations, they go into details, and then court takes a very strict view on these cases. But in this case, if the son and the two brothers who knew Sunanda, the son was apparently with Sunanda during her last few days, he was with her, and so if he is not making any allegations, then the court is saying that the prosecution has not been able to substantiate these allegations against Tharoor.
Okay, so Shashi Tharoor has been discharged, but what conclusion does the court reach about what caused Sunanda Pushkar's death?
Right, so in conclusion, if you look at it, the court has said that these medical boards have also stated that there is no definite opinion could be given on what the cause of death is, so whether the cause of death was homicidal, whether it was suicidal or accidental. So in the end, it has found no evidence of torture and abetment to suicide or murder against Shashi Tharoor, but the police have, after 7.5 years, not been able to really shed light on what happened to Sunanda Pushkar on that fateful night.
And next we talk about an alleged fraud. Between March 2020 and June 2021, when the entire country was focused on the raging pandemic and the crippling lockdowns, this is the time when a group of employees working at a Mumbai office siphoned off 21 crore rupees. These were the employees of the Kandivali branch of the Employees Provident Fund Organization, or EPFO, which is one of the world's largest social security organizations in terms of clientele and the volume of financial transactions undertaken. In this segment, Indian Express's Khushbu Narayan, who broke the story, joins us to talk about it. So Khushbu, you accessed the details of an ongoing internal investigation by the EPFO. Who is supposed to be the main person behind this, and how was this money siphoned off?
So the EPF probe has found that a clerk, his name is Chandan Kumar Sinha, he is the mastermind of this fraud. And what he did was, with the help of a few other officials, he obtained active bank accounts and Aadhaar details from mostly jobless migrant workers by paying commissions as low as 5,000 rupees. He then opened fake PF accounts using these details of the workers. He basically showed them to be employees of some city-based firms that shut down 10 to 15 years ago. Then what he did was he made some credit entries in these PF accounts. And after that, he filed applications for withdrawing money from these accounts. What he then did was that he verified and approved these withdrawals using system passwords of senior officials. Now, these senior officials had shared their passwords with him during the lockdown as not everyone was coming to work. What Sinha did was, after approving these withdrawals, he transferred the money from the PF pool to these individual bank accounts. There are around 817 such bank accounts belonging to migrant workers. And then he subsequently withdrew the money from the bank accounts.
And how did he manage to do this? Opening fake PF accounts and then withdrawing this amount of money. How did he do it without raising alarm bells?
So, see, the thing is, he knew the system and processes very well. As a result, he exploited the loopholes in the system and evaded all the alarms. For instance, most of these withdrawals were in the range of 1 to 3 lakh. Now, the system raises an alert, second round of verification, only if the withdrawal is more than 5 lakhs. Now, these fake credit entries that he made, but again, there was no alert generated in the system because EPFO has a provision for companies that have shut down. The bookkeeping is done, it is called a single entry bookkeeping, where the credit side need not match with the debit side. So that is how he was able to avoid all the alarms. And of course, he used the passwords of senior officers to approve these withdrawals.
Okay, so the main mastermind behind this, like you said, is this guy named Chandan Kumar Sinha. What do we know about him specifically? In your piece, you write that some people describe him as a flamboyant character.
Yes, according to officials, Chandan was affable and flamboyant too. We know that he owned some high-end cars and had multiple sports bikes, including Harley Davidson. And Sinha is 2005 batch philosophy graduate from Magad University in Gaya in Bihar. Sometime in early July, he admitted himself into a local hospital, and as soon as the alleged scam came to light, now he's absconding. Nobody knows about his whereabouts.
And I think one of the reasons this entire matter came to light was because of his lifestyle, right?
Yes, so this investigation was triggered by an anonymous complaint, which now officials are saying was from one of his relatives who saw a significant change in Sinha's lifestyle and tried to dig in and found out about it and reported it to the Kandivali office.
So basically, his luxurious lifestyle led to his relative being jealous, which then led to him being caught.
Yes.
But now this 21 crore that was siphoned off, will it come out of people's provident funds? Will individuals be affected?
So no individuals are likely to be affected because none of the individual accounts were misused. So the money that was fraudulently withdrawn from the PF accounts belonged to the pooled fund of EPFO, which holds deposits made by registered organizations every month. So typically what the EPFO does is that it pools the funds that it receives and later on invests them mostly in government securities. So this entire fraud has happened on the EPFO. So it is EPFO's loss and it is more like a bank robbery than any individual account being misused. Basically, the bank's chest has been robbed and not an individual account in the bank.
And the EPFO we know is one of the world's largest social security organizations. How much money does it deal with?
So, EPFO directly and indirectly manage up to 18 lakh crore in savings of individuals.
And this siphoning of 21 crore rupees happened in the Kandivali office in Mumbai. Does the organization suspect that this could have happened in other offices as well?
So this investigation and this fraud has kind of triggered an alarm across centers. So all the regional heads and the top employees of EPFO have been asked to check their domains and systems to see if a similar fraud has happened over there or not. So far, what we have learned is no other office has reported a fraud of this kind. But then again, during the pandemic, the Kandivali office alone processed claims of up to 6 lakhs. So the audit is scanning through the records to see if more such fraudulent withdrawals have happened or not.
And what steps is the EPFO taking to sort of ensure that this doesn't happen again?
So specifically after this fraud, the EPFO has decided to set up a provision where passwords of employees accessing the EPFO system will be invalid after 15 days unless it is changed. They are also trying to put a stop to one employee being assigned multiple roles in the organization. So these are essentially the two things that they are trying to do.
And in the end, we talk about the UNSC, that is the United Nations Security Council, one of the principal organs of the United Nations, which is charged with ensuring international peace and security. Taking a swipe at Pakistan, India yesterday told the UNSC that terror groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed continue to operate with both impunity and encouragement in the neighboring country. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, while addressing a high-level UN Security Council briefing, called on the global body not to take a selective view on the scourge of terrorism and to have courage to call out the doublespeak of those who extend state hospitality to individuals who have innocent blood on their hands.
In our own immediate neighborhood, ISIL Khorasan has become more energetic and is constantly seeking to expand its footprint. This should be taken seriously. Events unfolding in Afghanistan have naturally enhanced global concerns about their implications for both regional and international security. Whether it is in Afghanistan or against India, groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed continue to operate with both impunity and encouragement. We must never countenance sanctuaries for terrorists or overlook the raising of their resources. And when we see state hospitality being extended to those with innocents' bloods on their hand.
Without naming Pakistan, Jaishankar said that we must never countenance sanctuaries for terrorists who overlook their raising of resources. He also drew parallels between the COVID-19 pandemic and the problem of terrorism. He said, let us always remember that what is true of COVID-19 is even more true of terrorism. None of us are safe until all of us are safe. You were listening to Three Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.